Please stand for the words of our King. Our gospel this morning is taken from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 28, verses 1 through 10. After the Sabbath, at dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. The angel said to the woman, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus, who was crucified. He is not here, he has risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he is risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I have told you." So the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy, and ran to tell his disciples. Suddenly Jesus met them. "Greetings," he said. They came to him, clasped his feet, and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me." So far, our text. Please be seated. Dear Christian friends, what did you come here for this morning? Did you come here looking for breakfast? I know, of course, there's no one at our church except for the few people who are making our food pantry a possibility and making sure that our worship happens this morning. But on a normal Easter, you kind of come to church maybe to show off your favorite new dress. I don't know if some of you got up this morning and you dressed up for Easter. I know that my family did. I think there might be a picture waiting for our family later after this Easter service. There are certain traditions that are aching right now. And I have to say, what did you expect? Maybe you did come this morning and you tuned into us and you expected to worship God and to hear a word of encouragement. Well, let me ask you, did any of you come here expecting to find a dead man? That's what the women at the tomb were expecting to find. Listen to verse 1. After the Sabbath, that's Saturday, at the dawn on the first day of the week, that would be Sunday, today, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. You're going to see here this again, but they came with spices. According to the Gospel of John, 75 pounds of spices. Because they didn't have time to embalm the body. Because if you recall, they had to get Jesus' body off the cross into the tomb before sunset, which is the start of the Sabbath on that Friday. And so they thought, well, why don't we just try and go and do that? They came to grieve. They expected a dead body. Expectations are powerful things. What do you think the chief priests expected? You saw in the video, in that account from Matthew, they expected that Jesus would be alive, right? Well, not really. But they expected something was going to go on. They knew what Jesus said. That you could give them credit for, that they actually listened to him. And so they posted a guard. Well, how about those guards? What did the guards expect? Really? We're watching a dead guy? Disciples, I think we can handle a few fishermen. Okay. Well, what did the disciples expect, speaking of these guys? Did they expect to be next? Were there crosses with their names waiting for them? That's what happened to Jesus. Don't you think the Jews could have arranged to have every one of his followers skewered like an animal, just like they did their leader? Dear friends, Easter is not what you would expect. You come and you expect death, and yet you find life. You expect fear, and you find joy. You expect weakness, and you find strength. Easter is not what you would expect. Listen to verses 2 through 4. There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him, they shook and became like dead men. Now, it normally does not go well anytime an angel appears to someone. They usually just go straight to the ground. They're afraid, they're terrified. Well, I don't know that the Roman soldiers fared any better. In the video, you see them run away. Shook and became like dead men is a pretty good description. I don't think the Roman soldiers ever expected to see an angel. That was not something that they were interested in doing. And before we go any farther, just a word about the tomb. When the angel rolled the stone away from the tomb, it was not to let Jesus out. It was to let the living in. To see he is no longer here. Let's keep going. This is verses 5 through 7. The angel said to the woman, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, he has risen just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly tell his disciples. He is risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I have told you." Angels are, first and foremost, ministering servants sent to serve those who will inherit salvation. This is what the writer to the Hebrews tells us. And those who will inherit salvation is you and me and these women. Angels are, first and foremost, messengers. And the insight that they gave was extreme. Remember, these women did not expect to find an empty tomb. They expected to find a dead man. Hence the 75 pounds of spices. And they might be thinking, "Angel, don't rub it in. We knew he was crucified. That's why we just went through 40 days of Lent. Good Friday was just 2 days ago." It is a healthy spiritual exercise to see the extreme cost of our sin and to go through that. It is not enjoyable. What did they expect? Well, have you ever seen a child who has never faced any consequence for his sin, a naughty child? And he keeps on acting out because he does not expect any consequences. That will not go well for him later in life. When he loses a job, he has problems with his personal relationship, or maybe even worse. Because society and the law, the police will expect certain things of him, and there will be consequences. Well, the ladies, did not expect to find an alive Jesus. They expected to find a dead Jesus. Were they expecting the wrong thing? And I guess that's a question you have to ask. Easter's not what you would expect, and yet, what do we expect nowadays? I suppose if you go back to Palm Sunday, did the people there expect to make Jesus king by the end of the week? Were they expecting the wrong thing? How quickly things went downhill on that Thursday night when Jesus was scattered? And less than 24 hours later, he's dead? What did they expect? What do we expect? We sometimes expect things that our God never promises. Do we expect that life will be easy? Do we expect that we'll be happy? I've heard so many people come to me and say, "Pastor, I'm not happy. Doesn't God promise me that?" No. And the problem is that after a while, when you grow out of that young, naive stage where life is good and happy, and right around middle school, life hits you hard. In high school, you start to have adult problems. And then you get your first car payment. And then you have to make rent. And then you realize that taxes take a huge chunk out of your paycheck. And then you realize that life is hard. And then you start to expect disappointment. You start to expect suffering. You start to expect fear. And then you go back to verse 6. And you hear the angel, "He is not here. He is risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay." Easter's not what you would expect, because those women expected to find death, and they found life. They almost didn't want to. They said, how could this be? You would expect to find fear, and yet there's joy. And this is what you see in verse 7. Then go quickly tell his disciples, he has risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I have told you. Now you're the women. You take all this in. In verse 8, you walk away. So the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy. What does that mean? How can you be afraid and filled with joy at the same time? Does that make any sense? I think the idea is that they are all taking this in. It takes a little time, doesn't it? That's an awful lot to swallow when you expect to find a dead body and then he's not there. And they just don't get it. And this is where you expect to find weakness. And I got to tell you, if you ever thought that our nation was strong, all it takes is a little pandemic to bring us to our knees. We have struggled to find PPE, personal protective equipment. Are masks good? Are masks bad? There's a physician in our church who said that he was instructed not to wear a mask because it might scare people. This is an extreme amount of stress on so many people. And not only that, but there's other diseases out there. Our very own Carol Dietrich, as I'm sure you're aware, she was hospitalized 2 weeks ago with flu A. She got pneumonia and she lived. That's great. And so I find myself watching the news and I'm tired of seeing that death count. Tell me who's living. Why is that not the people who have survived Corona, not in the hundreds of thousands yet? I'm sure it will be in a matter of days, but that's what I want to see. And so I have to share with you this awesome story of this guy. That's Bill Lapshes. Bill Lapshes, I think his name is. This is a story from April 3rd. It was in the Washington Post, and he had beaten the coronavirus. He was really sick. He was 103 years old, but on Wednesday, April 3rd, he celebrated his 104th birthday. It's quite the milestone. He's a World War II vet, of course. Wonderful family. All excited to see him. Grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Couldn't believe, and the doctor said he just kept on getting better every day until the day they let him out of the hospital and they called him Perky. And that's an awesome story, isn't it? That 104-year-old, I mean, this disease is decimating nursing homes. And yet it's awesome to see that still people are living from this and that God granted him life. That's awesome. Now, I've shared with you all kinds of stories about how people have escaped death, whether it be falling out of an airplane and surviving, getting hit by a car, or diseases like coronavirus and living. But there's something more impressive than that. And that's that Jesus came back from the dead. You do not expect people to come back from the dead. Because I have to give you some bad news. 3 days after this story was written on April 3rd, on April 6th, Bill died. I don't know why. I was reading the comments, how people were just excited to see how this guy survived the coronavirus. And then one of the comments lived in his hometown and added in there, I'm sorry to say that Bill was called out of this earth. Immediately, I'm a Christian pastor, and I wanted to see, was he a Christian, any sign of his faith, anything. And there was no news. And so I'm back at Easter. Easter's not what you would expect. And there's kind of a sudden shock, isn't there? If you go to the first part of verse 4, you see the guards were so afraid of those angels. You see the women so afraid. And I see people so afraid now. People are in their home because, yes, they're obeying the government order. But there's genuine fear among people in our nation. And Easter changes everything. Suddenly, Jesus met them. Jesus knew he could not let them walk out of there confused, not understanding what happened. So he came to them. And in shock, there was a shift in their expectations now, because Easter changes everything. They had to kind of take it in. Then, suddenly Jesus met them. "Greetings," he said. Greetings? What is that? Why would he just say greetings? Well, understand what happens. Understand the quantum leap, the change that goes on in a Christian's life. Now, when you go to a funeral, Christian, what do you expect? Because of Easter, you expect that dead body will be alive. You expect that your dead body will be alive on the last day. Now, when you see your loved one, they will say greetings. You will just suddenly see them. And it kind of makes me excited to think about that I get to see the people to whom I've ministered. All my days, we're going to touch on this point in our Bible class, because one of the questions is, how can you possibly believe in the resurrection? Well, it's not that hard. We're going to go into a lot of the objective truth and fact around it. It's overwhelming. But that is a huge change. Listen to the last part of verse 9. They came to him, clasped his feet, and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Don't be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me." I have to tell you, Lent is 40 days long. That is a long season to focus on your sin and the cost thereof. Do you realize that it was not by chance that the historical church had set Lent for 40 days, and the Easter season is also 40 days? Jesus didn't just appear to the women, say greetings, and then bye. For 40 days, repeatedly, he appeared to them over and over and over again, because this takes time. There's a new normal that is probably going to happen in our nation because of this coronavirus. For people who are brand new to Christianity, for these women, there is a new normal. Death came to life. Fear came to joy. Weakness came to strength. And this is where we get to the disciples. And, easy there. Little help if you can get me back to the pink jelly bean, Lauren. There we go, the pink jelly bean. Yeah. This is where the pink jelly bean comes in handy. If you recall, and I don't think you heard Emmy say it, what was the part of the jelly bean Easter story that was the pink part? It was your pink lips. Lips that speak the story. One of the best parts of Easter is that you can go and share the message. And I just found this out this morning that Moravians are kissing cousins to Lutherans. And so if you see a Moravian brother or sister around, and once in a while I'll say this greeting, we do it the whole Easter season. He is risen. And maybe by the fourth or fifth week, you're kind of going, he's risen indeed. I mean, it's been a while since Easter, Pastor. I don't care. I still want to say it. He is risen, and then if you catch someone, sometimes they don't know what to say back, and they say, yes, he is, which is okay, they're trying. But yeah, if you catch somebody who just knows it, it's like an inside truth that Jesus lives. But now, the disciples. These are the guys who are going to start the Christian church. What are they doing? They are a vision of weakness. And what would Jesus call those disciples? These are the guys that left him in the Garden of Gethsemane. These are the guys that did not come to him in the courtyard. Just a couple. It was John and Peter just denied him 3 times. At the cross, we got John again, but that's it. What would Jesus call these cowards? These disgrace? He calls them brothers. He calls them brothers. These men who were cowering in fear, because remember, they were next. That's what you would expect. After Easter, they're in the street. They don't care if they get crucified. They don't care if they get arrested. They do, by the way. Some of them do get crucified too, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. They happily shed their blood because Jesus lives. So now let's go back to you. Easter's not what you would expect, and we went through some of the things that we may expect mistakenly. Do we put promises in God's mouth that were never there? What does God say? Well, first of all, I don't know if there's a bigger promise to keep than I'm going to be raised from the dead. Jesus kept that one. So if he can keep the big promises, what can he keep? The little ones too. He knows that money's tight for you right now. And he promises that he will provide for your family. He knows that you are being tempted. And it's a struggle every day. And he promises to give you a way out. And he loves you even when you fail. Does he promise happiness? No, he doesn't. But he promises something better. Contentment. That you have enough. That you are safe and at peace. These are the things that your God promises you and that make you strong. Dear friends, this Easter might not be what you expected. But I got to tell you that Easter changes everything. It changes death into life. It changes your fear into joy. And it changes your weakness into strength. Amen. Please stand.